Welcome to the Institute for Management Studies Leadership Conversations podcast, where we have leading thought leaders discussing their research and identifying ways that you can incorporate it to take your learning and development to the next level. Welcome, everyone, to this Institute for Management Studies Leadership Conversations podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to highlight relevant research and practical applications from esteemed leadership experts and practitioners. I'm excited today to be joined by Mike Robbins, New York Times bestselling author of 5 books, including Bring Your Whole Self to Work, and his latest, We're All in This Together. He's a sought-after speaker and consultant who delivers keynotes and seminars for some of the top organizations in the world, and is an expert in the areas of teamwork, leadership, and emotional intelligence. He's been featured on NPR, ABC News, Harvard Business Review, the New York Times, and many others. Thank you, Mike, for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Charles. Nice to be here. Always good to connect with you and all the wonderful folks out in the IMS world. I've been honored to partner with you and the team for probably about a decade now, I think.
I think you're right. It's been a great experience and a great partnership that we have.
Yeah.
I'd like to start each episode just with a little bit of background, and I can't help but to talk about this piece because it's so coincidental that at the same time I was playing college baseball at Arizona under Jerry Kindle,
Right.
you were on a higher trajectory, of course, a much better player, but you were also a left-hand pitcher and pitching about the same time at Stanford, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
had
we,
an illustrious career and you got drafted and, just had a great college career. And unfortunately it ended a little bit too soon for you.
that's true. Yeah, we got a chance to, play against each other in the Pac-10 back in those days. Although I did not like pitching at the University of Arizona. For everyone listening, whether you're a baseball fan or not, it's really hard to pitch at U of A because the ballpark is huge. The altitude's up, so the ball jumps and the ground is really hard. So unless they hit it right at somebody, it's going to be like a double or a triple in the alley. So I have some nightmares of pitching at the University of Arizona. But yeah, no, I had fun playing baseball at Stanford. It was a real dream come true, and then got drafted out of Stanford by the Kansas City Royals and did get to play pro baseball for a few years. Unfortunately, Charles, as you know, because I've shared this story many times as you've heard me speak, I got injured. I tore ligaments in my elbow and blew my arm out in the minor leagues. So had a series of surgeries and then had to retire from baseball, which was a big bummer. You and I both played the game for all those years, and it's like not just something you do, it's like an identity. But it did teach me a lot. And in fact, it has informed a lot of the work that I've done over the last 2 decades that focuses on teamwork and leadership. And a lot of those, sort of ideas were baked into me, I think, early on, just being on a bunch of different teams and being around a bunch of different coaches and seeing kind of what worked and what didn't work just from the people standpoint. And it wasn't until many years later when I started working in sort of the real world that I put it together and went, oh, that whole team chemistry thing from baseball is important. It's also important in business. We just call it culture. They're basically the same thing. And that's kind of what I've been obsessed with most of my life and career.
A lot of life and leadership lessons you can get out of sports. I definitely
Yeah.
agree. With my college coach, Jerry Kindle, he offered a lot of those insights. Like you said, I was probably a little bit too young to really benefit from them at that time, but looking back, I can see where he was headed.
Yeah.
And I wish I were a little bit more mindful of when I was younger, but
Yeah, exactly. When we know better, we do better, right? Isn't that what Maya Angelou taught us? So I think that's true. We're raising a couple teenagers at our house sometimes, and I look at them and go, you have no idea how good this insight and wisdom is that I'm giving to you. You really should pay attention, but that doesn't seem to work very well.
I'm in full agreement. I have teenagers of my own in my house, and I have the same experiences.
Yes.
So in this episode, I'd like to focus on one area usually, and I'd love to talk more about being an authentic leader.
Yeah.
So important in this day and age. Love to hear how you define it because you have an equation that you use, and I've heard you say it in programs, but
Yeah.
love for you to kind of unpack it a little, and then maybe we can go into one of those pieces in a little more detail.
Sure. Well, authenticity is something I've been studying for the last 15 years. And, it's interesting. It's evolved, Charles, over the last decade and a half or so since I've been looking at not just the research, but just the way we think about it, the way we talk about it. And so, this notion of authentic leadership that now is sort of ubiquitous, that people talk about a lot. It's, there's courses and programs and books and things about it. But, 15 years ago, we weren't talking about it as much. And I say that because I think the understanding that a lot of us have about authenticity has evolved, and it can vary a little bit depending on our age and where we grew up and how we were raised or trained or the type of industry that we work in. But in general, when I talk to people about authenticity, and I often ask them, what does it mean to be authentic? People talk about honesty and transparency or directness or genuineness. And it really is, the foundation of authenticity is honesty, first and foremost. But the way that I've learned through my research and my experience that in order for us to really be authentic, and authentic leaders in particular, we have to remove something from our honesty and we have to add something to it. So this is what I call, and you refer to, I call it the authenticity equation. So it's honesty minus self-righteousness. So that's what we have to remove, plus vulnerability. So that's what we have to add. So we take the self-righteousness out and we add the vulnerability. Now, if we do both of those things, then we can actually start operating with authenticity. But if it's just honesty from that self-righteous place, it's actually not, sometimes people think about it as being blunt or just telling it like it is, which can be really important and effective at times. But as we've all learned the hard way, that doesn't always necessarily land with people. And then on the flip side, we can try to sort of sugarcoat it and say it really nice and make sure. And then we realize, I didn't actually communicate the message. I was trying to give some feedback and the person walked away and didn't really get what I was saying. So it's really being able to do both of those things at the same time.
I would agree with you. And I like to look at the first one, that's self-righteousness, right? Because it's okay to have a strong opinion about something. You just don't want to make other people feel inferior to you, which I see that a lot with a self-righteous attitude. They're quick to judge. They're very critical.
Right.
Quick to point out how their opinion is more superior than the others.
Right.
So, but many people are blind to that, I found as well.
Yeah.
For them to identify that. What is a way that that's easy for them to use? I mean, besides asking someone for help, because sometimes it's hard to get that honest, right?
Yeah. Well, a couple things to think about. So there's when I'm talking about self-righteousness, what I always want to make sure to let people know is it doesn't mean not to have strong opinions. I have a lot of strong opinions. There's nothing wrong with our opinions. We're entitled to our opinions. Taking a position on something is fine. It's just, there's a difference between self-righteousness, which you were talking about, arrogance. It's like, I'm right, you're wrong. And conviction, which is, I believe this to be true. I'm willing to speak up about it. I'm willing to engage. I've thought about this. Maybe I've done a lot of research. I'm going to bring forth examples and experience and why I think the way that I think to make a case, to try to prove my point. But I have enough humility, enough self-awareness to realize a couple of things. First of all, I might be wrong, which happens all the time, right? I mean, it like I often say to people, hey, have you ever, thought you were convinced you were right about something only to realize upon further reflection or based on feedback or experience, you were actually wrong? Yeah, it happens all the time. In fact, it's a really important life lesson, leadership lesson. It's a way we grow, a way we evolve. I think about myself as a parent, parenting teenagers during COVID. I'm wrong and making mistakes all the time and having to learn from those mistakes in real time as a leader of my own team. Again, make mistakes, make bad decisions. Early in the pandemic, I said to my team, listen, I'm out of the prediction business, because I would keep making predictions. Here's what I think, here's what's going to happen. And I was wrong every time because, of course, what do I know? I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a public health expert. I was just freaked out like everybody else and was trying to somehow control the uncontrollable. So we do these things. So again, the righteousness is the I'm right, you're wrong. The conviction is, you know what? I believe this. I'm willing to speak up about it and really take a position, but I know I could potentially be wrong. And even if it's not a right, wrong thing, because sometimes it's really just like a values thing, or it's the way I operate or the way I communicate or the way I see the world. Can we at least acknowledge maybe there's another way to look at this thing that I can't currently see? I was working with a group of scientists and not that long ago and doing a session with them. And it was really interesting because here are like these really, really smart, very educated people who've worked in their fields for years. I mean, they are literal experts. And we were having this conversation about self-righteousness. And one of the scientists in the room raised his hand and he said, gosh, I don't think of it as self-righteousness, because the truth is, like, I know so much. Right? He said, but I can see how sometimes I communicate with people who don't have as much experience, or maybe they come in differently, or they haven't worked in the field as long. And I just speak like I'm the expert because I've been around for so long. And he's like, maybe that's why sometimes people don't respond well to me. And we were all kind of laughing because, of course, that makes sense. But the tricky part, and for a lot of you listening who are leaders, the more senior you are, the more you've been around, the more you do have wisdom and experience. It's not that you want to pretend like you don't, but just because you've been doing it for a decade or two or three or whatever, doesn't mean you have the right answer all the time. In fact, sometimes it's that person who just started 3 weeks ago, who's got that beginner's mind. It's like, why don't we try this? And then we immediately go, well, what do they know? And then actually, that's a good idea. We never thought of it that way. So we have to just be open and curious so that, again, we can be passionate, have strong opinions, but do it from that healthy place of conviction. When we come from a place of self-righteousness, we basically shut off and shut down anyone and everyone else that doesn't see it exactly the way we see it.
No, I would agree with you. And I like that example because a lot of times when they come into an industry somewhat new, they're not so ingrained in their way of thinking. They
Right.
don't have that group think. So they're thinking outside the box, providing solutions.
Totally.
Just shutting them down, then you're not going to benefit from those. So it's having a strong opinion is not the problem. You just need to sprinkle it with some humility, some empathy, understanding other perspectives, even if
Totally.
you're an expert in that area. And that's difficult because, like you said, you get ingrained in a way of thinking and have this certain role that you hold every single day. And trying to
Totally.
step out of that, right, is sometimes difficult to become more self-aware, to have that self-awareness to say, wait a minute, I just need to step back here, right?
Yeah.
And take in some of those other points of view.
Well, and I also, I also think there's an important piece that you're bringing up that's really is that sense of humility and that sense of awareness, right? A lot of what you're talking about is emotional intelligence, right? So like self-awareness, self-management, and then some social awareness and relationship management. And the truth is, EQ is something we can work on, right? Our emotional intelligence. And I have found for myself, and I don't, maybe other people listening can relate to this, like in this Zoom virtual world we've been working in over the last couple of years. And again, a lot of us are starting to go back to the office and people work in different industries. So maybe, but a lot of folks, especially in certain industries, have been home or working virtually almost exclusively. And I've spent a lot of time, like you have, and everybody in the whole IMS community, we've all spent a lot of time on Zoom. It's hard to pick up on certain cues. It's hard to read the room, right? It's hard to, we interrupt each other like I just did to you. And we do things that we wouldn't necessarily do if we're sitting in the same. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, but just an awareness. Like I said to my wife the other day, I think my emotional intelligence has gone down over the last 2 years because I'm doing a lot of communicating in a weird sort of way. And this is the way that we work, and we're going to keep working this way to some degree, even post pandemic. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it's harder, not impossible, and still definitely relevant and necessary, and we can still be effective. But when we're all sitting around a table, there's a certain dynamic that exists, or when we're sitting in a room one-on-one and we can look in someone's eyes versus when we're all on a screen together, better than being on a conference call maybe, or, faxing each other or emailing each other in terms of actual human interaction, but still challenging.
I would I would completely agree with you with that. I think it's something that we haven't practiced near enough
Yeah.
to get good at, and it's more difficult, like you stated. It's definitely more difficult. That brings back to my teenagers who communicate mainly through text, right? So
Right.
how can you assess those other things when the type of communication becomes more and more impersonal
Right.
rather than more connected, right? So
It,
you
it's,
just
you're
it's a
right.
tough situation.
It's funny you say that. I was a woman at one of my events a couple weeks ago was telling me that her son wanted to get in touch with her and he just texted her mom, 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 like a couple times in a row. And she's like worried. And so I think she either texted him back or called him. What's the matter? Oh, I just want to talk to you. And she's like, use the phone. Like you have the phone in your hand. My phone number's in there. Press the button. We can actually have a live conversation. It's this amazing technology. So yeah, I mean, we have to figure out ways to, with all the technology we have, still connect human to human. And then that comes back to, again, but ultimately the self-righteousness piece is, can I have enough awareness of myself? Because the tricky thing, Charles, when you and I, when humans, when we're being self-righteous, most of the time we don't think we're being self-righteous. We just think we're right. And we're just trying to prove our point. And some of us are more demonstrative about it. Some of us might yell and scream or demand, I'm right, listen to me. Others of us might be a little more manipulative or sort of covert about it. But in either case, if what we're driving for is simply trying to prove our point and be right, what we don't realize is it actually does damage to our relationships. And sometimes we might win the argument, or we might be the loudest voice in the room, or make the best argument so we get our way. But what we don't realize, what we've done, again, the underlying message of self-righteousness is I'm right, therefore you're wrong. So people are disempowered. So the reason why this is so important in life, but especially in leadership, is if you make decisions or you give feedback or you do things that ultimately have people leaving feeling that they're wrong, that they're bad, that they're flawed in some way, whether you intended that or not, you're now not doing your job as a leader. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions, and sometimes we have to give hard feedback and have difficult conversations or make a call. I was on a call earlier today with someone who said, there's the leader of our team. He's really great. He's really smart, but he doesn't lead. And I said, what do you mean? She said, he doesn't make decisions. Like sometimes we talk around in circles and it drives everyone crazy. Like he has to just make a decision. And then we started talking more about it. I was like, why do you think that is? And she's like, I think he's scared to make the wrong decision. And I was like, well, who isn't? We all are, right? I don't want to make the wrong decision. So again, but just understanding some of those things on a human level is part of what makes us better leaders.
But I think the sooner we can become aware of those things, the better, right? So
Yeah.
maybe, having that self-awareness and making sure that you catch yourself after 10 seconds versus an hour versus
Right.
minutes. I mean, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
To say, wait a minute, I'm conscious of what I'm doing. I'm going to step back. I'm not going to keep talking. I'm not going to react. I'm going
Right.
to think about what my next words are, my next step is, so that I'm not continually going down the path. But that's the first step. I agree with you. You got to be self-aware. You got to have that emotional intelligence. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to identify in yourself times at which you are self-righteous. And then also times where you're not exhibiting that vulnerability, because a lot of leaders that I've talked to state that it's scary
Yeah.
to be vulnerable. They
Yeah.
don't want to let people know of their weaknesses, of things that they're not good at, because that shows a weakness, a vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that they feel it sends the wrong message. But I would argue, which I think you agree with, that sends actually the right message.
Yeah. And look, it is scary to be vulnerable in life. And we've been trained, and this goes back, remember I was talking earlier about age and generation. And so I have empathy depending on your age or depending on where you grew up or how you grew up or how you were trained and raised as a leader. There was a school of thought for many, many years. It still exists, but it's less prevalent, this notion of, never let them see you sweat and always have the right answer and never show any kind of. And I think what we're learning, I mean, there's a lot of great work out there, like the great work of Dr. Brene Brown and others who've been teaching us through research and experience, like, wait a minute, there's actually a ton of research that shows the best determining factor of courage is vulnerability. And if we're going to build trust with other humans, we got to be vulnerable. If we're going to be innovative and creative, we got to be willing to take risks. That's all vulnerability. If groups are going to have psychological safety as a team. And so I love actually Brene Brown's definition of vulnerability. She says that it's risk, emotional exposure, and uncertainty. And you think about those things, risk, emotional exposure, uncertainty, they're not comfortable. They're not enjoyable. They're just part of life, part of business, part of leadership, part of everything that we do that really matters requires one, two, or all three of those things. And so look, you can be a really private person. You don't have to share about your life and your family. And that's fine if you do. And some people do. Some people are open books, or, hey, look at me on Instagram or Facebook and here's everything. And here's how other people are just very private and don't want to talk about that stuff. But you can still be vulnerable, because vulnerability, like an example, we're talking about self-righteousness. What if you as a leader started to notice, oh, I have these things, I do these things where I can be self-righteous or I can shut people down. I don't mean to, I want to work on that. Well, what's a great way to work on it? Maybe tell your team, hey, I'm working on this. Could you help me? Could you point it out? If you're on the receiving end of my self-righteousness, could you let me know either in the moment or after the fact so that I can have more awareness about it so that I don't do it, right? Like I think about this with my own team, but also even with my wife, Michelle and I both, but she has a number of little buzzwords she'll say to me as reminders of, like, stop being so annoying or whatever it is, not mean, but we have agreements with each other so that we check in with each other, both as parents, but also when we're in social settings. And that's a way that you can actually help each other, but you have to be courageous enough and vulnerable enough to let people know, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm working on this. Could you help me? And that is a risk, but ultimately there's such a benefit to that if we're willing to go there.
I would agree with you. And I think it's much easier to get that honest feedback in a personal situation. I love how you use a story with your wife, Michelle, and she says, stop mansplaining, or your daughter said it to you about what you were
Yes.
doing with your wife. And I present that same thing for my kids. Harder when you're higher up in senior management.
Yes.
You get that honest feedback. Yes, I agree with you. You can be vulnerable, but they're still going to be qualifying what they say to you.
Yeah.
Unless there's that psychological sense of safety. And
Yes.
it can only go so far. So I hear that a lot from senior level leaders.
Yeah.
They just want that honest feedback, but it's very hard to get.
It is. And, at that level, you're right. The more senior you go, the more people are going to kind of blow smoke or tell you things that they think you want to hear. I often advise really senior leaders, executives, there's a couple places where you might be able to get it. Number one, hopefully from your peers, but that can be tricky too, because there can be competition or politics or things, hopefully from your own manager. If you can't get it directly from your peers or your own manager, the team that reports to you, maybe. It all depends on the nature of your relationships, but those are three sources potentially The more senior you go, the harder that's going to be to get. That's why it's really important to have a coach or an advisor or mentors, people outside who both have some awareness of what you do, right? When I talk to CEOs, one of my first questions is always, do you have a coach and do you have a mentor? At least one of each of those things, if not more than one person in those roles, because someone, meaning the difference being a coach might be someone you hire who, like, I coach a lot of CEOs, but I've never been a CEO per se. I mean, I'm the president of my own company, but it's not like running a big, Fortune 500 company or something. So you can get coached by someone who maybe doesn't have the same experience. You want to get mentored by someone who's walked the path. And both of those things, and ideally people that you respect, that you trust, who also know they can take the gloves off and really give you the feedback that you need, and you'll take it because that's necessary. And again, they say it's sort of lonely at the top or whatever all the cliches are, but the truth is there just aren't as many people that are going to tell you the truth, or that don't have an agenda, or that aren't in some way intimidated, and or just don't know what you're dealing with. They don't know what you're going through. Right. So it's like there are times in life where we can take advice or feedback from a lot of sources, and there's other times we need very specific, right? It's like, as parents, if you have a child that's dealing with a specific issue or malady, you want to hear from someone else who's either an expert in that field or has actually gone through that with their own kid. You don't want to just hear from, your grandma and some other person and your friend down the street, because it's like, now you're making me crazy with all the advice. So that's sometimes you got to be very prescriptive and specific about the support that you want, particularly the more senior you are.
I think that's great advice, especially for senior leaders, to have one of both. And
Yeah.
even for those mid-level managers, if they can't have one, then there's lots of resources, a lot of ways,
Yeah.
technology right now. And even ones that they may not know personally, but through books, through other resources.
Yeah.
And use as a mentor as they hopefully climb that corporate ladder.
Absolutely. And in most organizations, I mean, even as busy as people are, and even during COVID times when we're more disconnected and separated, there's a lot of great mentorship programs. Or if there's not an organized one, if you just go ask someone, could you mentor me? Would you support me? People are usually honored. Yeah, they're busy, but it's like, hey, that means I respect and admire you enough. It's vulnerable to go ask, but I want to be the kind of leader that you are. And I'd love to learn from you. I always like to say, and I mean, I've had so many mentors in my life that have helped me along the way, but the answer is always no if you don't ask. And when we take it out of the realm of leadership and just think of this in terms of life or career development growth, it's like being able to put ourselves out there and ask for support. We're not always going to get a yes. Sometimes we might get disappointed or feel a little bit rejected. But if we don't ask, often it's not going to be offered. And it's not because people are selfish or rude or they don't care. It's just they don't know that we need the support or that we want it. People aren't just walking around going, hey, do you want to be my mentee? Like, that's not usually the way that conversation goes. Or could I help you? Or can I show you a few things? Because that's A, presumptuous, B, a little condescending, and C, it's usually not on their radar screen. But if we're interested and we see this other person say, I really respect and admire you, I'm wanting to grow and develop in my career, would you help me with that? 99 times out of 100, the person's going to say yes. And even if the one time they say no, they'll be incredibly honored and like, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. I'm just overflowing with too many things right now, but let me refer you to someone else, or let me get back to you in 6 months when maybe things aren't as crazy. And, you'd be surprised.
No, that's a great approach and takes a lot of the fear away from that.
Yeah.
It's just with the new and emerging leaders that I see, there's that fear there, right? That they're worried about rejection, saying no, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
It's true.
You need to take more shots. You need to get your reps in, and you learn a lot from the experience, right? There's really the word failure is really just feedback. I mean, it's great feedback for you to get to how to do things differently or better next time.
It's true. Well, and that's the whole thing about failure. I mean, look, you and I both come from the world of baseball. And one of the things that I both hated about baseball, but I really appreciate now, especially, there's so much failure in baseball, right? And even if you're listening, you don't like baseball. I mean, just a couple things to think about. It's like a team in the major leagues that has like an incredible season will win 100 games in the regular season. There's 162 games in the regular season. So maybe one or two teams every year wins 100 games. That means they lose 62 games. And that's like extraordinary. A hitter, I mean, I was a pitcher, but a hitter who, makes it out 7 out of 10 times, has a 300 batting average, is like an all-star. That's a great batting average. So I say that just in the context of like playing that sport, as you and I did, Charles, for so many years. There's so much failure, even when you're good, which in other sports, if you're really, really good at certain sports, you don't have a ton of failure. I mean, maybe as you get to the, senior most or the professional level, but in general, like, you could go play softball and hit like 800 if you're really good at it, just hit a home run every time. But I say that because learning how to fail is actually a really important aspect of success. Failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success. And if you think of most successful people you know, if you really ask them their story and find out how they got there, you'll learn there's a ton of failure along the way. It wasn't like they just popped out and they were just good at everything. Even if someone's super talented, they have to figure out how to do whatever it is they're doing. And that usually requires some trial and error and some falling on our face and figuring stuff out. And the truth is, when we're young, when we're less experienced, we're afraid of the failure because we're like, oh, no one's going to take me seriously, or they're going to think I'm stupid, or I don't deserve the job, or whatever, which makes sense. But then the older we get, or the more senior we get, then it's like, oh, I'm supposed to know everything. I'm supposed to have it together. And like, right. So we have different reasons at different stages of our lives and our careers to talk ourselves out of taking risks because why? They're vulnerable. And there is potentially, I might fall on my face and look like an idiot. But, like you said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's great. And I think that you make a strong argument of why baseball players are probably the most resilient of all the professional players. 'Cause you're right. Failure is common throughout that course.
Yeah,
And I've read too that a person that goes through the first part of their life with a series of successes without failure, that's more detrimental to them.
totally.
They're not learning, right?
Yeah,
And eventually when they do learn, how are they going to bounce back? How are they
yeah,
going to come back from that? Because they don't know how to deal with it. So it's so critical to have that failure. And I love in your program how you stated, and you stated in relation to a baseball story, but I love how to change that. Why is this happening to me? To why is this event happening for me?
yeah.
To me is a mindset shift altogether
It's
and
big.
puts things in the proper perspective.
Yeah, I talk about this in my program in the context of growth mindset. And when my baseball career ended, I got hurt and had a series of surgeries and had to walk away from the game, which was really devastating because I loved it and it was my what I did, but it was my identity. And a friend of mine said that to me. If you ask the question why this happened to me, it's not going to help you. In fact, it's going to hurt you. But if you change just one word, change the word to the word for, it'll change the way you're relating to this challenge and any challenge you face. And even when it's a really big one, and that was a really big one for me, but even the day-to-day annoyances, all the way up to the tragedies and the major stuff that happens to us in life, it's really how we look at it. And not to sugarcoat it, not to minimize it. I mean, again, just think of all what we've been through over COVID. I don't know anybody who hasn't had something happen significant over the course of the last 2 years. And even if it hasn't happened directly to us, someone close to us, like we've all been impacted. And it's been hard and challenging. And even if you personally have navigated through it well, or you've enjoyed being at home, or your job wasn't impacted, or your family stayed healthy, or, you can check most of the boxes of like, hey, we made it through this pretty well. And some people definitely haven't. I think all of us, even now, we're not all the way through it and on the other side of it. I think we can all reflect and go, I've learned a lot. This has caused me to rethink things and work differently and adjust and pivot and all the things. So again, like even something that's really difficult. And I think, even we go through loss or we go through pain, it's like there is a way to learn from it if we choose to. And so much of what, you focus on and what we focus on here at IMS and what growth and development is about is like not only learning new information or learning new skills, but it's also learning how to navigate situations in life, business, leadership more effectively. Because thinking that it's like, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they said this great thing. They were talking about like, we think that when things are hard or when things are bad or when we're struggling, that's like we've fallen off the path. They were like, no, that's the path. It's just sometimes the path is bumpy. Sometimes it's, and we got to learn how to keep going on the path, even when it's not all smooth sailing, because it often isn't, by the way. And especially these days, like it's not really smooth. And the few people that it's smooth sailing for now, whenever I talk to them, they're almost like embarrassed to admit that things are going really well because it's like not going well for most people.
No, I would agree with you. And it's like the Ryan Holiday, the best-selling author of the obstacle is the way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is the path.
Yeah.
And I think that if we, if we have that mindset change, that's great. And I think also if we really focus on gratitude
Yeah.
and focus, I heard the saying once that if we magnified our blessings as much as we magnified our problems,
Yeah.
we'd be a whole lot happier, right? So it's taking that time each day to say, there's always something to be grateful for.
Yeah.
What are those things? And really having that mindset, because there's a lot of things you can look at in the environment and society,
Right.
everything that's going on in the world, and you can get awful depressed and go down that rabbit hole. And and it's going to take you down there for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Until you realize to take a step back, have that perspective change and say, okay, here's things that I could be grateful for right now.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was listening to an interview with a professor from Yale, and she was talking about this phenomenon, a psychological phenomenon. And I didn't know this, but apparently these days now, when kids get into college, they like film themselves and then post it, right? So it's opening the letter or getting the email or however it comes in, and they, yeah, I got into Yale. And she said, what's amazing is she does this with her students at Yale, and then she will pull some of those videos off the internet. And she's like, I teach usually like sophomores and juniors, so they've been at school for a little while, and then I post them or I share them in class. And what I ask them is their video pops up and there's them as a senior in high school learning that they just got in. They're so excited. They work so hard. It's a big accomplishment. Did you wake up this morning doing that? She asked the kids. And they're just a couple of years into their college career. Like, you're at Yale. At that point, you actually weren't even in yet. You just got in. But the point she's trying to make with them is she teaches a class on happiness at Yale, but she's like, we get excited about the thing, but then what happens pretty quickly is we sort of take it for granted. And the truth is, again, if you love your job or you work for some great company or you love what you get to do, or, great, but you're probably not going to walk into work every day and go, I get to be here, right? Because that's a little ridiculous. But in some ways, we could, right? There's so many things. Years ago, Michelle, my wife, and I were watching a special. Oprah Winfrey did a special when she opened up her school in Africa for girls. This is probably 15, 20 years ago. And it was a really beautiful special. And at one point, there's the moment that the girls all get to see the school. And it's this beautiful cathedral of a school. And we've now learned about a lot of these girls and their backstories. And they come from these villages and live in these it's just extraordinary, the whole thing. So to watch these young women walk into this beautiful school that they're now going to get to live in and get educated in, it's super moving. And there's a scene in which the girls are all running through the halls and they're so filled with joy. And they run into the bathroom. And they start pretending like they're taking showers, even though the water's not running. They're fully clothed. They're just pretending. And my wife, Michelle, and I look at each other and we both burst into tears because it was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if these young women have ever taken a hot shower in a place like that before. And it just had me pause for a moment and just think of all of my privilege and all of the things. Like, I don't get in the shower in the morning in my house and go, oh my gosh, we have water and it's hot and there's pressure. And how lucky am I? Because millions and if not billions of people on the planet don't have access to this, and I take it for granted. And I'm like annoyed when it doesn't get hot fast enough, or if someone else is taking a shower or whatever the heck, right? So I say all of that not to shame anybody, but there's so many things, Charles, that you and I and all of us can be grateful for every moment of every day. It's really a choice, and as you were saying, it's a mindset.
I would agree with that completely. I mean, I heard it say in one of the books that I read that the pursuit of happiness is really the pursuit of unhappiness.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you acquire something, it no longer satisfies you. So
right.
You have to look for that next thing and then that next thing. And it's having that whole paradigm shift to really be appreciative and to realize how lucky you are for the country you were born in.
Yeah.
Or where you are in the world in general. And, we try to do that with our kids, is give them some appreciation, because everyone's racing to the top.
Right.
But not really helping those at the bottom, rising the tide for everyone. Is so important to give back to your community, to be in service to others and really help those with all the things that you've been given so that you make someone's life better as well.
It's so true. And you think about this, I mean, you and I grew up playing sports, and the focus, and we're raising kids now, and there's so much focus on achievement in school, achievement in sports. We get into the business world and it's achievement in our careers and get to the next level and get to be a director and then get to be a VP. I mean, all these, and nothing wrong with that. And I'm a pretty ambitious person. I like to achieve things. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so I'm like wired that way. However, what we don't usually get taught, unless we start paying attention to it ourselves, is we don't learn the art of fulfillment, right? The art of really enjoying life. Like, where's that class? Where's that? Like, that doesn't really come in. It's so focused. And especially in our Western American culture, there's so much focus on achievement, and we're trying to unlock the science of achievement, which is important and is valuable. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, wait a minute, how do I actually learn how to be happy and fulfilled? I mean, one of the things that drew me into this work, Charles, was when my baseball career ended, and I often tell this part of the story, is my big regret wasn't that I didn't make it to the big leagues, wasn't that, I didn't get to pitch until I was 40 years old and pitch in the World Series at Yankee Stadium. I mean, yeah, I was sad and disappointed that was never going to happen. But the regret was that I didn't fully appreciate it while it was happening. I was so busy trying to make it. I was so busy focused on my primary goal of getting there that it was like, it sounds like a cliche, and it is to some degree, but it's like I did not smell the roses. And oftentimes in life, sadly, we don't appreciate things until they're gone or until they're taken away. I mean, you just think of the last couple of years. It's like we're missing business travel and like meeting rooms and different things. It's like, oh, I didn't think I was going to miss some of those stuff that I actually thought were kind of annoying sometimes. That now that I can't do it, I'm like, oh, I want that, right? As weird as that is, there was something about that I actually liked and appreciated but I took it for granted and didn't realize again, oh, the back-to-back meetings all day at the office, but I got to walk down the hall and talk to people and sit and have lunch. And oh, the commute. Oh yeah, that's my long commute, but I got to sit in my car and think about things or call home or listen to the radio or whatever. I mean, again, and it's a tricky thing because sometimes we can appreciate, multiple things and conflicting things, but just having that mindset or that perspective is really important.
I would agree with you, having that appreciation, that appreciative mindset,
Yeah.
not only for yourself, but for others.
Yeah.
You talk about it and you differentiate this very, very, very soundly is that between appreciation and recognition. And with this achievement culture, right? Everyone wants to be recognized.
Right.
Not many people know the value in being appreciated, because I don't know of anyone, or maybe a small handful, that says, you know what, I just get too much appreciation. I feel like I don't need any more. Everyone needs more appreciation.
Yeah.
And it's not dependent on results, right? It's based on really who they are, valuing them for who they are.
Yeah. And this is a big one, again, for any of you listening who manage people, right? At whatever level, however long you've been doing it. Like, so recognition is about performance, about outcome. It can be informal. Hey, good job, way to go. But if someone produces something, it could be more formal. Like, hey, you get an award, you get a bonus, you get a promotion, you get, right? But it's a reaction to an outcome, right? Again, in the sports world, it's like you won the game, or you got an award because you had a great season, or you win the championship, you get a trophy, you got, right? We've done this weird thing in our culture though, where we start to like, everybody gets a trophy.
Right.
We do that with our kids because we don't want to hurt their feelings, which again, good intention, but strange way to go about it. Because now all of a sudden we got to differentiate in life, whether it's with children or teenagers or especially adults. Here's great, here's good, here's mediocre, here's poor. It's not a value judgment on who you are as a human being. It's just the results you produced, right? I often
tied right together.
Right. But so if we separate it out and we put performance over here. So if you are an A performer, you're going to get an A. If you're a B performer, C performer, D performer, again, we do have to have some way of evaluating great versus good versus mediocre. On the value side, on the human side, we got to value people and care about people all the time, irrespective of performance, of title, of role, of outcome, right? Because if it's conditional, then what happens? I was just talking to someone about this actually earlier today. Even in the publishing world, we were talking about books and writing books and publishing books. And look, it's a business. So if you have a mega best-selling author on your imprint, that person is going to get more money. They're going to get more attention because like we want to keep that person happy and engaged. We want to make sure their book sells because they're our big celebrity or big whatever. And then the rest of the authors, it's sort of a hierarchy of things, which again makes sense in the value of the business. But on a human level, it's just like on a sports team. The star of the team is not a better human being than the last person on the bench. You're top performer on your team. So what appreciation is about, valuing people. It's about caring about people. And the truth is, to your point, no one feels overappreciated for the most part. We mostly feel underappreciated. And so but appreciation doesn't mean heaping praise on people necessarily. It means caring about them, listening to them, empathizing with them, connecting with them, understanding a little bit about what's going on in their world to whatever degree. Some people are, again, more private than others, but leaders that actually show that they care and the people on their team know that they care. When people feel valued, they're more likely to produce results. They're more likely to stay. They're more likely to engage. They're more likely to ask for help. They're more likely to be open to feedback. They're more likely to do all the things we want them to do, ultimately, if they feel valued and appreciated. If they don't feel valued and appreciated, it's going to be a lot harder.
I would agree. And I think leaders can practice this in many different roles that they have.
Yeah.
As a parent, as a coach, there's many opportunities to really separate these two, because these two have merged together to where they're just one and the same, when in fact, like you just stated, they are different and they have two different purposes. So we can't forget that they are different. And then the other piece of it really is when someone appreciates you, a lot of times people feel awkward.
Yes.
And they deflect it. And I love your analogy that you use. It's like, I'm giving you a present.
Yes.
Present. But
totally.
They say, no. It's you're good.
Right.
It's like, that's just say thank you. Right.
Right. Yeah. And that, look, it's tricky because the truth is when someone expresses appreciation for us, I mean, for me, like I like it and it can be a little awkward if it's done publicly or how they do it. The tendency for most of us is to want to reciprocate. Oh, you too. And right. And that's okay. But what we want to do is first take it in. Again, when I use that analogy, it's like if I gave you a birthday present on your birthday, it would be weird if you ran into the other room and came out with a present for me, unless we happen to have the same birthday, which is unlikely. But even worse, Charles, is that we do deflect it or we diminish it by somehow, oh no, like I don't deserve that, or I'm an idiot, or I shouldn't. It's like throwing the present on the floor and saying, without even opening it, saying, I don't deserve that present. I'm going to throw it on the floor. I'm going to stomp on it because I'm not worthy of it. And then we would never do that. That would be socially unacceptable and strange. But if we did do that, we would clearly offend the person who gave us the gift. We would ruin the gift, and we probably wouldn't get any more gifts from them the next time around. So when someone expresses appreciation for us, it is like they're giving us a mental, emotional gift, a verbal gift, if you will. Maybe they write it down. And our job is to receive the gift, even and especially if we don't agree with them, because it's subjective. So it's not my job to correct you if you appreciate. If there's something you value about me and you want to let me know, my job is to just say thank you and really take it in. It's not go, oh, Charles, no, what are you talking about? Or they're so much better than me, or I'm an idiot like this, or whatever we do, because it's actually a vulnerability thing. We don't know the discomfort of it. It touches into some kind of emotional exposure, and then we feel awkward and we don't exactly know how to respond. And there's some weird social norm that, like, we're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to make jokes about it. Oh, I'll pay you later. Thanks for saying that. Instead of just saying, wow, thank you very much. Like, thanks for saying that. That really means a lot to me.
So powerful, so simple. Wish more people could do it, and hopefully they'll take that advice and move forward with it.
Yeah.
As we reach the end of this episode, I always like to ask my guests, is there a recent book, podcast that you have recently heard or read that's inspired you that you would like to share with our listeners?
There's a couple. I mean, I just listened to Daniel Pink was on Brene Brown's podcast a little while back, and he just wrote a book called The Power of Regret. Really, really good and fascinating conversation they had on the podcast. She has two podcasts, but she has one called Dare to Lead. So I love that. I love her and all of her work. She has a new book out called Atlas of the Heart. So both Dan Pink's new book and Brene Brown's new book are great. And her podcasts, both of them, she always has great guests and good insights. So I'm a big fan and highly recommend those.
Thanks, Mike. And remind everyone how they can get a hold of you or get in contact with you.
Well, the best place to do that is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to connect with you, Charles, and grateful to be part of the IMS family.
Thank you. And this concludes this episode of the IMS Leadership Conversations podcast. You can send us your feedback at info@ims-online.com. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, it can be found both on Apple and Spotify. It can also be accessed on our website at ims-online.com. Until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference.